Hello, good people. Welcome to example number 5, and number 6 will be in. Maybe we can do them in two separate videos. They'll be short, quick videos. Um, I want to start by saying that when we factor, we sometimes get used to using the variable x. So you always see like x squared plus 2x minus 3 or whatever. But I do want you to know that quadratic equations and any type of expression can be in terms and variables other than x. So in this part 3, you're going to see me use a y instead of an x. On this example 6, I use an x. In the one I want you to try, I use an x, and then I also use an m. So we can use different letters. We don't have to use x's. So that's one thing to remember. But I do want to say that these examples prove to show us something that we haven't seen before, which is how can we um, factor if instead of 3 terms, we're only given 2 terms. And so we're going to start the factoring process the same way. And notice that part 3 is called finding a pattern, because I'm hoping that by the end of these 2 examples, and after you do the 2 that you need to do, you can find a shortcut pattern that can help you factor situations where you have only 2 terms instead of 3 terms. And when I say 2 terms, I mean I have an x squared and I'm subtracting 16. So there's only 2 terms. Or in the other example that I'm going to do, I have 4x squared and I have 9. And those are 2 things that I'm subtracting, and that's it. And so how do we approach this is the question. So we're going to start the same way, which is we're going to build our box, a rectangle, if you will, with 4 squares. And in the first box, we're going to first put the first term. So we're going to start the same way. And in the last box, we're going to put the last term. But here's where we run into an issue. We have 2 boxes to fill, and we don't have anything left. So before we had 3 things. Put the first in the first box, the second, the last in the last box. And the middle term, we broke it up into 2 pieces. But here we don't have anything. So we're going to continue the process. We're going to multiply 16 times the coefficient here. Well, the coefficient is 1, so I'm still going to get 16. And I want to know what are 2 numbers that multiply to give me 16. Well, it could be 1 times 16. You can use your calculator to figure it out. 2 times 8. 4 times 4, and that's it. But I'm looking for the 2 numbers, so there's 2 numbers, that when I subtract them, give me the middle term. But there is no middle term. Notice there's a y squared term, but there's no y term. So if there's no y term, if you can't see it, then that must be 0, right? So usually there's a x squared, there's usually an x term, and then there's usually a number constant term. I'll show you, like, right? We usually have an x squared term, we have an x term, and then we have a number term. Well, here we have a y squared term, we have a number term, but we don't have a y by itself term. We have a y to the second power. And so when we don't see it, that means it's not there. And if it's not there, that means 0 is what I want. So I'm looking for 2 numbers. So when you only have 2 terms, one of them is the y squared and one of them is the number constant term, and you're missing the middle term, that means I want 2 numbers that subtract, because this is a minus, subtract to give me 0. Well, the only pair that I could subtract to give me 0 are 4 and 4. That means one of these squares has to be plus 4y, and then the other one has to be minus 4y. Why? Because when you put these 2 together, plus 4y and minus 4y, they're going to cancel each other out. They're going to disappear, which is what happened. There's no middle term. And I'm using y because this was my variable y. When I do example 6, I'm going to use x because this is my variable x. So now we're going to continue the process the way we did it before, which is, what do these 2 have in common? Well, they both have a y in common. Cool. What times y will give me y squared? Well, y. Oh, excuse me. I think I'm pressing the wrong thing. What times y will give me y squared? Y. What times y will give me plus 4y? Plus 4. What times y will give me minus 4y? Minus 4. And if you multiply minus 4 times plus 4, you get negative 16. I found my factoring. Remember, we're supposed to figure out what are two binomials that multiply to give me y squared minus 4 minus 16. And these are my two binomials, y minus 4 and y plus 4. So I guess what I need you to remember is when you have the squared term and you have a constant term, but you're missing the middle term, that means we're always going to choose the factors that when you subtract them will give you 0. And that kind of means that the two numbers have to be the same, right? Okay, that's it. That's example number 5. We follow the same process. There was one little wrinkle. There was no middle term. When there's no middle term, that means I need to find the factors that subtract to give me 0 because there's no middle term. But everything else was pretty similar. In the next video, we'll do example 6, and then I'm going to ask you to do the U tries over here on your own, and then see if you can find a pattern in all the answers that you got. Because if you do find a pattern, that could be a shortcut that could save you some time.